Hello and welcome to the Alex Nitzberg Show. I'm Alex Nitzberg and today my guest is Dr. Emanuele Ottolenghi. Dr. Ottolenghi is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and an expert at its Center on Sanctions and Illicit Finance focused on Iran. He's also the author of several books, including The Pasdaran, Inside Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So thank you for joining me on the show today, Dr. Ottolenghi. It's great to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you've researched and written about the issue of Iranian Islamization in Central and South America. So could you please explain what the Iranians are doing in Latin America, what they're working to accomplish, and why you believe Americans should be concerned about this issue?
The Iranian regime sees Latin America as a land of conquest. It believes that it is fertile ground for the export of its revolutionary ideals, and it looks to like-minded revolutionary movements that, while maybe not sharing Iran's faith, do have in common a strong hatred for the West and for the United States and Israel by extension. And it leverages these common grounds not just to establish political alliances with countries like Cuba and Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Bolivia, but also to spread the word of Shia radical Islam among people within those movements and then more extensively across the continent. It is a project that Iran has pursued relentlessly for more than 3 decades, since it sent the first clerical missionaries in the early 1980s to Argentina. And today it has a presence in pretty much every country in the Western Hemisphere, with mosques, cultural centers, itinerant clerics, publications in local languages, radio and TV stations, and the whole apparatus to serve the purpose of making new adepts. The reason why we should worry is twofold. First, the spread, this is not missionaries spreading faith and addressing spiritual needs alone. These are clerics spreading a radical, fanatical ideology that is fed by hatred for Jews, for Israel, for the United States, for Western values. And the second reason why we should worry is that historically the Iranians have used these networks not just to spread their ideology, but also to build supportive logistical infrastructure that could serve the purpose of facilitating terror operations in Latin America against Western targets or from Latin America to the United States. So there are 2 reasons. One, it's an ideology of hatred that is being spread patiently but effectively across the continent, and 2, the possibility that the people recruited to this ideology could serve in the future to facilitate terror attacks.
And in one of your articles, an October 2016 article, you said, and this is a quote from your article, that there are, quote, 80 or so cultural centers Iran has established across Central and South America, end quote. And you just mentioned cultural centers. So you also noted that there were, quote, thousands of Latin American converts who, thanks to the center's missionary work, flocked to the regime-run Al-Mustafa International University in Qom each year for indoctrination. So I wanted to ask you, that was a little while ago, so are there more now? And which countries are these centers located in? In which country has the Islamization process been most successful, in your opinion, so far?
So I haven't found a country in Latin America that does not have at least a nominal presence. There are centers pretty much everywhere. It's hard to answer your second question, of which country has been most, in which country Iran has been most successful in this endeavor, because we don't have accurate numbers yet. The Iranians don't publish these numbers, and one has to rely on social media in order to figure out how many people are affected by this process. I think that the Iranians have been more effective and more successful in places where they have been present longer and where they have also the local support of existing Shia communities, both Lebanese and Iranian. So these places would be Argentina, where they started, Brazil, where they have had a presence also since the late 1980s with emissaries there. And then they have had remarkable success, I would say surprisingly, in a number of countries where there virtually is no presence of Shia communities, but where nevertheless the local conditions have been favorable to their penetration. Countries like Colombia, where they have made inroads among the lower strata of society, and Cuba, where they have found a regime surprisingly willing to let them operate in its own territory.
And you also write about Hezbollah in conjunction with this, so could you explain how Hezbollah ties into this entire issue?
Well, so again, I mentioned the presence and supportive role of existing Shia expatriate communities, and these in Latin America are mostly made of Lebanese with strong and enduring ties with Hezbollah. Hezbollah benefits from Iran's support in the Middle East. Iran is its patron. It supplies it with weapons, with training, with funds. But Hezbollah's growing budget over the years has increasingly needed to rely also on external remittances. These communities have provided that, and it is in these communities with their mosques that the missionary activities frequently take place. It's easier to start from an existing mosque within an existing community to base yourself and then reach out in your missionary work than it is to arrive in a place where there is no pre-existing infrastructure. And so that's why actually the Iranians chose Argentina and Brazil to begin their proselytizing work in Latin America in the 1980s. There were already large Lebanese Shia communities. There was one mosque in Argentina. They facilitated the establishment of mosques elsewhere for existing communities, and it is within those communities that they operated. So that's how the Hezbollah-Iran nexus began. More recently, of course, Hezbollah, as I mentioned, uses these communities to raise funds, oftentimes through illicit business endeavors. And again, the Iranians have interfaced with the local Hezbollah operatives, providing them with assistance, with training, with access to the embassy, with instructions, allowing them to fly back to Iran frequently, to meet in Lebanon, to pass messages, to coordinate strategies, and so on. So the two entities, Iran and Hezbollah, operate separately, but they're very much coordinating very closely. They're intertwined in many respects. Most ominously, of course, and this was the case with the bombing of the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires in '92 and then of the Jewish Cultural Center in Buenos Aires in '94, the Hezbollah operatives in Latin America facilitated both terror attacks by providing logistical support and financial services, by enabling the people who carried out the attack or planned it to access their services and help, and in some cases also to extricate them after the event. So the cooperation between these two entities is extensive. They need each other, and they provide each other with any kind of assistance as needed.
So if you could go into a little more detail, what exactly are these radical Muslims doing to convert people and to radicalize people? Like, what activities are they engaging in specifically?
Well, so their messaging is modulated to the needs of, or to the local conditions. They have realized that Latin American in Latin America there is a deep thirst for spirituality. There is the Catholic Church is giving ground everywhere to evangelical churches who are winning new converts and supporters every day. And in some countries, the Catholic Church is viewed, certainly within the mold of activist leftist movements, as the religion of the conquerors and also the religion of the elites. So they penetrate Latin America by modulating a radical message of social justice. They offer a revolutionary message tinged with religion, and in some countries, actually, they mold this message, as I said, to meet local needs or circumstances. So oftentimes addressing the grievances of indigenous people, for example, and leveraging their own indigenous identity as an instrument to draw them to Iran. So, for example, in Peru, where there virtually is no Shia presence to speak of, where the Muslim community is made mainly of Pakistani immigrants who came into Peru for trade purposes, the Iranians have actually targeted indigenous people in the southern Andean region, people of Inca origins, and have leveraged their Inca pride and nationalism and resentment for the central government in Lima in order to draw them closer to Shia Islam. The local leader of this operation actually has somehow blended his Inca nationalism with Iran's radical version of Shia Islam, and gone as far as to say that the Mahdi in the Shia tradition, the kind of Islamic Shia Messiah that should reveal himself eventually at the end of times, is none other than the lost Inca emperor that the Incas, wait in order to restore their past lost glory. And so here you have a perfect example of a situation where the Iranians have astutely allowed for this kind of rather peculiar idea to emerge in order to convert hundreds of indigenous people from southern Peru, ship them to Iran where they get indoctrinated, and return them to Peru where they continue to be student professionals, but most importantly, political activists. And once they come back, of course, they have been brainwashed to embrace very, very strong and radical anti-Western ideas.
And do you see any parallel between anything that's going on in Central and South America and the Islamic movement in the United States?
Look, the operation that the Iranians are running in South and Central America to convert locals and to spread their revolution is just a branch of a global project that they're pursuing with full funding, backing, and support of the regime in Tehran. I mean, you mentioned in passing before in one of your questions Al-Mustafa University, the university that is in charge of indoctrinating these converts when they come to Iran. Al-Mustafa does not only focus on Latin speakers, on sort of Hispanic communities speaking mainly Spanish and Portuguese. It has programs in dozens of languages. It has branches in dozens of countries outside of Iran, and these include Western countries. They have a presence in Great Britain, in Australia, in Germany, in Italy, across Europe indeed. And in their promotional videos, which are available online, you can see actually American students being interviewed while they are in Tehran attending classes. So clearly their outreach does not stop at the borders of the United States. They get into the United States under the guise of freedom of religion and spread their radical anti-American message and sentiment here as well.
And are there other nations in Central and South America and other terror groups besides Hezbollah and Iran that you're aware of that are also engaging in similar activity, or is it mainly the two of them?
Well, so there are other Islamic terror organizations in South America that engage in terror finance. They are pretty much all the organizations you can think of either have a presence or trying to establish a presence because they understand that these are places where it's relatively easy and cost-free to engage in illicit activities and raise funds. So you have the presence of Hamas, of Gamat Islamiyah. There are reports of Al-Qaeda and even ISIS having sent emissaries down to try and set up shop. You also have the more institutionalized but no less problematic missionary activities of Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Qatari-sponsored preachers. So on the Sunni side, you also have significant activity, establishment of mosques, and conversion, aggressive conversion of locals by Sunni Salafis. So overall, although maybe the numbers are still not as significant as one would imagine over time, these phenomena need to be monitored. They need to be acknowledged. We need to pay attention. These are not people who are just competing for, to be the shepherds of the spiritual flock of Latin America. These are people who go there intentionally to spread a virulent message of religious hatred, and the efforts to radicalize people, which often goes along with the effort to raise funds for terror activities overseas, are two intertwined phenomena that the United States should be very concerned about and should monitor and take action against.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to join me on the show today, Dr. Ottolenghi. It's been great to have you on.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you all for listening to the Alex Nitzberg Show. If you'd like to learn more about what Dr. Ottolenghi just discussed today, you can visit defenddemocracy.org to read some of his writings.